Welcome to part 2 of my dice making in Blender tutorial. Check the description for a link to the first part. Right, so the next step is gonna be preparing your file for actually making your dice. Now, we're gonna make the whole set in the same file, so you're gonna want to prepare a file structure that you can use to make sure everything is tidied up. So over here in the scene collection, which will be empty for you, you're going to create a font collection, right? So create a collection, you give it the name of your font, right? Your font set. And then you create a new collection and then duplicate that one until you have 7 of them. And you're gonna give the name D4, D6, and so on until you have one for each of your dice. I went with M here because I like to always make sure I know which font it belongs to. When you have all of those created, inside each one of them, you're gonna want an extra collection. That's because each one of these collections is gonna hold a solid, which is gonna be your dice, right? But then it will also hold the actual numbers, right? And these are gonna be a lot. If you take a look here, these are a lot. They will quickly pile up, right? So for that, you're going to want to have an extra collection inside each of one of these to have your numbers over there, right? So make sure you have that file structure, and we can go on to making the shapes. So to start with this, you're gonna open a Shift Add menu, you're gonna go down to the Math function and click on Regular Solid. And in here, you can change between the different solids that you need, right? So you have all of them except for the one you need for the D10, right? So you're gonna want to add one of each and then make sure you have an extra, the D12. So you need 2 dodecahedrons and one of each of the other ones. You're gonna move all of them inside every collection you have, right? So that way you will have each shape already in its own collection. One of the dodecahedrons, you're gonna move it into the D10 collection. So that extra dodecahedron, you wanna turn it into a D10. How do you do that? Well, you go into edit mode, you select everything and do a limited dissolve. Then you're gonna choose 2 faces. I recommend the ones that are aligned with the x-axis. So this face and this face, you're going to delete them. With 2, you're gonna go into edge mode, select those edges, go over to TinyCut and right click and go vertex at intersection. Then if you switch over to vertex mode, you see that you have a vertex over there. So you can select 2 vertices and go F to create an edge there. You go over to edge mode and you can select those 2, create triangle, and so on with every single side. And if you do that for both sides, you will have a D10 basically. Now, when you have this, you are going to want to select all and limited dissolve again to get rid of those lines. This is a good moment to go over every single mesh you have and limited dissolve all of them to make sure that you have your geometry as clean as possible. Now, before we do anything else, I'm gonna suggest you choose which scale you want for your D10. So you're gonna create an edge over there with F between those 2 vertices, the top and bottom. And you're gonna use that to create a new orientation with this button, which you're gonna name D10/D100 axis. It will also be the axis for the D12, by the way. And with that, you delete the edge because you don't need it. You then select all, and you can, in edit mode, scale along that Y axis, and you will be able to make a chunkier or a pointier D10. It's really simple, it won't affect your numbering, so don't worry about that. And you can choose how much you want. I suggest you either leave it intact, which will have the same angles here as the D12, and I find that quite pleasing, or you scale along that axis by a certain number amount. So for example, 0.5 would be 50%, that's way too much, but 0.75 is a nice look. when you're done with that, duplicate your D10 solid and put it in the D100. And this is a good point to rename every single one of your solids. So rename all of them, and then we're going to go on to the scaling part. For scaling, the easiest way to do it is going with the D20 as a reference for all of the other shapes. So you're gonna choose the size of your D20, then you're gonna scale all of the other ones so that they are, roughly the appropriate shape for the D20. So for that, what I like to do, the easiest way I find, is create a sphere. You're gonna give it the radius of the D20 that you want. So for example, the standard D20 size in most mass-produced dies is 12 millimeters radius. So you create a sphere with a radius of 12 millimeters, and you go into orthographic mode, and you scale your D20 until the edges, the corners are about to poke out. That will give it a radius of about 12 millimeters, right? I have gone with 14 millimeters here, which I like. It's bigger than the standard, but it's still not quite chunky. It's still easy to handle, right? So once you have your D20 size chosen, scale all of the other dies appropriately. You can choose your own method. I like to scale them just by eye, so that they sort of are smaller than the D20, but still big enough that they can be from the same set, right? So after you have everything scaled, you're gonna want to make sure that you have everything selected. So you go over to here, select all, and you want to apply scale. Don't apply anything else ever, only scale. That's important. So after you do that, you're gonna go on to numbering. Now, we're gonna start with the D4. So let's go ahead and go to File and Append. Go over to your prefab file where you have put your font. Go over to Objects and look for the font you saved. You should only have one font, so it should be easy for you. I'm gonna go with, for example, this. So I've got my numbers here. So this D4 is actually gonna take a little bit of custom orientations, as you see I have here. So let's go ahead and prepare it for that. So we're gonna rotate all of them in global and individual origins on the z-axis, minus 90 degrees to put them here. Now make sure you have your snap turned on, and you want it to be in phase, snap with closest, and align rotation to target. You go into medium point, you go into edit mode with the die selected, choose the face, Ctrl S, cursor to selected. Now you go out of edit mode, select all of your numbers, use a snap to align them, then Shift S and select into cursor. Now you're gonna grab your 1, you're gonna change to local coordinates, G, Y, you're gonna move it, for example, 5 millimeters. This will change depending on which set you're doing. I'm thinking 5 might be too much for me. I'm going to go with 0.5 less, right? So let's do that. Now you move the 2 around its z-axis 120 degrees, and then move it along its y-axis 4.5 millimeters, and do the same with the 3. Yes, just with the 3, minus 120 instead of 120, G, Y, 4.5. Then D4 needs to be on this corner, right? Because this tip is gonna be for the 2, this is gonna be for the 3, for the 1, you need a 4 over here. So you're gonna change your cursor to the center. You're gonna set your pivot point to 3D cursor, and with global coordinates, move your 4 along the z-axis 120 degrees. That will put it on the center of this face. Then you change to local coordinates, medium point, rotate Z minus 120, G, Y, 4.5 millimeters. Now it ends up a little too close to the edge, and I generally think these numbers are a little too big for the dies. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab all of the numbers. I'm gonna change to individual origins. And with local coordinates on, I'm gonna scale along the X and Y axis. So we're gonna lock with Shift set the Z axis. And I'm gonna do 0.8. That will scale them without changing the depth of the numbers. Now, gonna go back to median point, and we need to create the custom orientations, right? Because I'm gonna show you how to place the 1 with global coordinates. You're gonna change to 3D cursor, Shift D, rotate around the Z axis 120 degrees. Shift D, rotate Z axis 120 degrees. And as you can see, you already have the 1 placed, right? That's really simple. However, you can't do that for the 3, 2, and 4, right? You need an axis that is lined up perpendicular to the opposite face so that it goes through that corner. So how do you do that? You use the custom orientations that we talked about in the first part, right? So you go into edit mode, you select a face. For example, this one is gonna be for the 4. So you create a custom orientation with this. It will create one. You change the name to the appropriate name, the 4, for example. And you're gonna do the same for the one for the 2 with this face, and for the one for the 3 with this one, right? I already have them, so I'm not going to create them. I'm simply gonna switch to them, and with the pivot point on 3D cursor, I'm gonna choose the 4. Shift duplicate, rotate around the Z axis 120 degrees. Shift D, rotate, Z axis 120 degrees. And we have the 4 placed. You do the same for the 2 and the 3. So it really is that easy. Now, say you have scaled them and you want to, for example, move them a little closer to the center, right? So you grab all of your numbers, which you should have in a collection like this one, D4, then D4 1 or D4 numbers. So you grab all of your numbers from your collection, then you go into a local transform, you go into individual origins, you do G, Y, and for example, -1 millimeter. And that moves all of them along their own individual transforms. You can do that for scaling too. Say you wanted them to be less deep, right? So you scale around their z-axis to, I don't know, 0.75, right? You can do that anytime you want. You can move them around. It's really easy. Now, a detail before I move on to the next size is you can go into edit mode, and if you want your dice to be beveled, to have the beveled corners, you're gonna grab your corners with the vertex mode in edit mode, and you're gonna do Control Shift B. That will allow you to do this. Now, with the scroll wheel, you can change the number of vertices you want in your bevel if you want rounded edges, rounded corners. I personally like the flat bevels for the D4. With 1 or 2, with the numbers, you can actually type in exact amounts of bevel, right? And finally, to actually make the inlays with the numbers, instead of going over here and adding, boolean modifier and going over, you just grab all of your numbers, then grab the dice so that the dice is the active element. Then you do Alt X, and you have here boolean different modifier, which will instantly add all the modifiers to the dice in just one click. So it is really easy, really fast, and it's the reason we have the advanced boolean tool add-on. Now I'm gonna delete this D4, and we're gonna go on with the next one, which is gonna be the D6. So for the D6, let's bring in some numbers. These ones are good, probably. So I have my 1 through 6 here, and the D6 is really easy. Just make sure you're in a median point, and go over to 3 in edit mode, select this face, and just straight up put the 1 there, then you have it there. For the 6 you're gonna need to move it, but it's also really easy, just the opposite face. Then you will need to rotate it 180 degrees around its x-axis so that it is aiming opposite to the 1 and it is straight in its own face. Right, so now for the 2, 3, 4, and 5, I like to have the 2 here. Now for the 3 and 4, simply what I like to do is rotate around its y-axis 90 degrees, rotate y-axis minus 90 degrees. Then you have the 3 here, and you have the 4 here. And if you want them to aim in a different direction, remember local, medium point, z-axis, rotate 180 degrees, you have it aimed in a different direction. Now, the D8 is really easy. It might be the easiest one of them. But here's where I'm going to introduce the process that you're going to use for the next bit, right? So you're going to want your D8 to have the numbers opposite to each other adding up to 9, right? And you're going to want the odd numbers on one side, the even numbers on the other. So you're gonna have 1, 3, 5, and 7. And the way you want them ordered is if you have the 1 here on this face, right? This face, like this. You want the number next to it to be the next highest number minus the 8, which is gonna be opposite to it, right? So it's gonna be 1, 7. Then you want the next smallest number, which is gonna be the 3, right? And then you want the number that's left, so it's gonna be 5. So it's 1, 7, 3, 5, right? And you want basically the same but opposite for the other face, right? So first of all, grab all the other numbers that are gonna go on the top side and move them just like you did with the 2. I mean with the 1. Then do the opposite face with the opposite numbers, which are gonna be conveniently already rotated when you align them. Now you're gonna go over to your outliner and you want to move the 7 to this face, and you want to move the 2 to this face, right? Because it has to be, it's 8 here, it has to be 2 here, right? The next smallest number. So you're gonna grab the 7 and the 2. You're gonna go to global coordinates, 3D cursor. Make sure that your 3D cursor is at the world origin or at the center of your dice if it's different. And then you grab your 2 numbers, rotate C 90 degrees. Now, you can actually do this much easier without a 3D cursor. Just change the median point because the center is also gonna be the median point between the 2 numbers, right? So you grab the 6 and 3, which should be on the opposite side. You move them around the z-axis 180 degrees, and you have them placed. You do the same with 5 and 4. Z-axis, and this time you do minus 90 because it's on this side, and it is so easy to do. It's really fast, and you're gonna see how it easily applies to the rest of your set, right? We have 3 dice left to do. I'm gonna show you the D10 first, and then the D12, which is gonna use the same technique and even the same transform. So for the D10, we're gonna bring in the numbers 1 through 10, move them around a little bit. And if you remember when we made the D10, we talked about scaling it using the custom orientation that we named D10 D100 axis. So we're gonna use that. Now you're gonna choose the top and bottom face, grab all of your odd numbers, and hold on. I have to go in and select that first. Make sure you're on medium point for that. And grab all of your odd numbers. place them there, and in my case I'm gonna hop into local and rotate. Then then put your 3D cursor over there, grab all your other numbers and put them there. Rotate them the same way, and now you have them placed. You just go onto D10, D100 axis, median point, make sure you're on median point, and you go over it the same way you did with the D8. You select 2, rotate, this time it's gonna be Y, because it's the one aligned with the dice, and you do 72, because it has 5 faces and 360, between 5 is 72. So 72, then the next one is gonna be Y 144. Next one is going to be Y minus 144. Then those two are Y minus 72. And you have your D10 done. Now for the D12, you're basically gonna do the same thing, except the 1 and 12 are going to be already placed, right? They're not gonna be moving around. So you're going to append your numbers 1 through 12. You're gonna keep the same transform orientation. For now I'm gonna go to local to place them, but you're gonna use that same one from the D10. Now place your 1, and I like to always have my numbers pointing towards one of the corners of the dice, right? So see, and I'm gonna do 90. So I'm gonna do the same for the 12. Rotate C 90, and now I'm gonna choose a top face. It's gonna be this one, and I'm gonna grab all of my odd numbers. Hold on, I always forget about that. Okay, now place them over there, rotate them 90, minus 90 in this case, so that the bottom of the numbers is over here and the top is with that. And then do the same on the opposite side for the 2 through 10. Rotate C minus 90, and you have your numbers. Now it's the same thing as with the D10, except you're gonna ignore the 12 and the 1, they're already there, and you're also gonna ignore the 11 and the 2, because they're already there, right? They don't have to move. So rotate Y, 72, rotate Y, 144, rotate Y, minus 144, rotate Y, minus 72. And you have your D12 done. Now, I haven't done this with the previous two, but remember that for the actual inlays, you just grab all of your numbers and your dice, then alt text different. And I'm gonna go over to D20, which is the fastest out of all of them. Now, first of all, you're gonna wanna create an axis, so hop into edit mode, go into shift set for wireframe mode. Then you're gonna, I already have it, but I'm gonna do it anyway. So you're gonna choose something that's aligned. I like to align it with the x-axis, right? So you can choose the two opposite vertices aligned with the x-axis, or with the x-axis on the other direction, or any with the y-axis. It really doesn't matter. But yeah, I like to choose this one and this one. And then you create an edge, create a transform orientation, name it D20 axis, delete the edge, go out of that, go out of wireframe view, and then add your numbers, 1 through 20. Now, how are we gonna place them? There are a few sort of standardized ways to place the numbers on a D20. What I like to do is I have my top corner, I have my bottom corner, and the first 10 numbers, I place them on those, right? So aiming towards that corner would be 1, then the next highest number without the 20, so that's 19, then the next lowest number, that's 3, then the next highest, 17, and the next lowest, 5. So it's 1, 19, 3, 17, 5, right? So that's on that side, and on the other side it's with the 20. So opposite to the 1 is 20, then opposite to the 19 is 2, opposite to 17 is 4, opposite to 5 is 16, right? So it's really simple. Let's just grab the, just select the face that we're gonna use. I'm just gonna check if my axis is actually the one I'm thinking of. It should be Y. Yes, that's correct. Okay, so make sure you're a medium point. You select the face that you want, and it has to be one of the faces that's aligned with one of the points you're gonna choose as your top and bottom. Then go 1, 19, 17, 3, and 5. Place them there, just like you've done with all the other ones. Make sure you're on local coordinates. Rotate C 90, no, minus 90. Now, you might see they're a little too big, so we're gonna scale them, right? Depending on your scales that you've chosen up to this point, they might not be too big, but for me they are. So I'm gonna go to individual origins, select all of my dice, and use this as reference for scaling. So Shift Z, and it seems like 0.7 is good. So I'm gonna type 0.7. And that will change all of the scales without changing the depth. Make sure you're a medium point and go to the other side. So that's 20, then next lowest, next highest, next lowest, and next highest. So place them over there. Rotate C minus 90, and they're lined up with that face. Now, instead of already placing them, we're gonna go ahead and place the other ones. So on this ring of triangles aiming down from the top of the dice, we're gonna put the odd numbers, and on the other ring, the one aiming up, we're gonna put the even numbers. Grab your odd numbers, place them there. You're gonna turn them around its local axis, minus 90 degrees, or 90? Yeah, 90, only 90. So you want them to aim towards the edge, towards the corner, right? Just like the ones at the top and bottom. So you do that, then on this other face, you do the same with the other numbers. Place them like that, rotate 90, and now you are going to change to the axis that you have next to your medium point, and you're gonna do the same thing with the D12 and D10, and this time the trick is you're gonna have 2 pairs instead of 1 for each turn. So you have the 2 and 19, but you also have the 14 and the 7, right? Because in those rings, right, you have the top, you have the bottom, and then you have the rings going around the dice. So in those rings, the highest and lowest number are the 15 and the 6, right? So 15 and 6 are going to stay there, and then the other numbers are going to rotate around. So that means that at the top and bottom, you have 2 and 19. Then around the rings, you have 14 and 7. There we go, 7. So you have the D20 axis, rotate, Y, 72. This case is going to be minus 72. I like to do it in this direction. It's counterclockwise. And you just do the same with the next one. 18, 13, 8, and 3. Rotate Y, minus 144. 17, 12, 9, 4, rotate Y, 144, 16, 11, 12, and 5, rotate Y, 72. And you have your D20 done. As with everything else, you grab the numbers, grab your dice, alt X, and difference. And you have your dice finished. Now, One thing I recommend now as the last step before exporting is you grab everything, all of your dice, all of your numbers, absolutely everything. You Control A and you apply a scale. Now you did a scale for the dice earlier, but you probably have scaled your numbers too. So it's good practice to just do that every once in a while. Now I'm gonna delete this because I already have it. And the next step is simply importing. So how do you import? You go over to the N menu. If it doesn't show up, you have to press N, right? That closes and opens it. And then you go over to here in 3D print, which is in this part over here. You choose this, choose a folder where you want to put your dice, and simply export like that. You select one of them, only one, export. Go over to the next one, select the dice, export. And just like that, you export the whole set and you're done. Now, I didn't show you the D100, but you already know. You know how to do the D10. It's exactly the same. So that really is everything on how to make a dice set that you can actually print. You only have to add support in Chitubox or Lightyear Slicer, and make sure you use a resin printer because theirs are not going to print very well on FDM, right? I might do a follow-up video on how to support the dice, and I will leave my coffee in the description of the video. I would really appreciate it if you supported me, as this has taken a lot of work writing the script and recording several times. It also takes a long time editing, so I would really appreciate that.